Each of us will introduce ourselves and we'll say a couple of things, but most importantly, we want to hear what you have to say. So maybe Leah.
Good morning, thank you. Sorry about that. It was kind of nice to visit with some of you. Students from Skyview, how cool is that? Anyways, I'm a state representative and we just formed, reorganized, or whatever you call it. We're all sworn at on this week, and it was pretty exciting. We have a lot of new members in the Minnesota House, and we happen to be in the majority, which is nice. We've been in a minority for a little while, and quite honestly, it's not as much fun to be in the minority. I mean, I think I was pretty successful in the minority, but it is a lot more fun, and we can do a lot of different things and exciting things from Minnesota. So I'm not going to talk about that.
What committees? Want to say what committees?
Oh, committees? But I'm on 6 committees. So I'm on higher ed, I'm on government operations, I'm on ways and means, I'm on rules, and what else, or something else? Oh, and then I'm chair of legacy, but I think there's another committee of that too. So anyways, it's pretty exciting times. I'm going to be a little busy.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning. My name is Peter Fisher. I represent the area of Maplewood that's right around here, going up into White Bear Lake. I represent the southern part of White Bear Lake and also the communities of Maplewood, Birchwood, and Willardy. I want to say thank you to everyone for being here. It's great to see some folks out here on a cold morning. Currently in the state capitol, I represent several different committees. First of all, I'm on the Health and Human Services Committee, that's a policy committee. I'm on the Housing Finance and Policy. I'm on the Environmental Natural Resource Finance Committee, and then I am chair of the subcommittee on water. And then I also serve on the Legislative Commission. I serve on the Legislative Water Commission.
Hi, good morning. Thank you all for being here. It starts to actually feel a little like January finally, right? Although I saw some pictures, like they're looking for snow in Virginia, and yet we don't have any. What is with that? That's pretty strange. I'm Senate District. And also South Oakdale, Landfall, and the city of Woodbury. I'm halfway through my second term, so 6 years, and really excited to be getting back to work. And it's really interesting, you know, with the new Walz administration and with so many new faces and voices over in the House, there's a real shot of energy going through the Capitol right now that's pretty exciting. So I think people are feeling pretty optimistic that, you know, it sort of changes the conversations a little bit, which means, you know, I think that increases our chances of being able to get some stuff done. In terms of committees, my list has stayed pretty stable. I am on the education, so it's E12, Early Childhood through 12th grade Education Committee, Finance and Policy. We actually merged those this year in the Senate. That was one change that happened for us. And I'm on Transportation, again, still. And in the Senate, we have State Government, Finance and Policy, and Elections. That's all one committee. So we get to cover some pretty interesting topics in that one as well. And I'm looking forward to a great conversation today.
And hi, my name is Tu Zhang. I'm a state representative for 53A, the A side of Susan Kent's Senate District, and I'm filling in the seat for the great Representative Joanne Ward. And so the committees I'm on is taxes. I'll be in higher ed with Lily.
Awesome.
Property taxes and local government. And so,
Great.
And you were just on the other side of this wall.
that was my chair right
a month
there.
ago. That's awesome.
Which is part of why you got put on the
Yeah.
taxes committee.
Yeah.
And as the state senator, my district includes parts of Maplewood and all of North St. Paul, parts of Oakdale, and then into White Bear Lake, Matamidi, Willardy, and Birchwood. I'm the ranking member, meaning I'm in the minority, for Education E12 Policy and Finance, serving with Senator Kent. I'm also a member of the Bonding or the Capital Investment Committee, which invests in infrastructure, a variety of projects affecting all of Minnesota, and also a member of the Local Government Committee, working with various issues that impact local governments. So I do a lot of work with the local officials on that. And I'm also a member of the Water Commission with Representative Fisher, I'm the chair of that actually for the State Senate. It's a bipartisan group, and we have a number of recommendations on water policy that the legislature will be considering. Just very briefly, you know that our number one priority this session is to adopt a budget. It'll be about $50 billion for 2 years. Any number of subjects. The biggest part of that budget is education, and then we'll see health and human services. A number of other issues though as well. Transportation, which is so important. Corrections, and we have not decided anything at this point. The whole budget will be laid out. There will be a proposal by Governor Walz February 19, where he'll share that. We'll have the update on the budget forecast. Then there will be hearings in the House and Senate to determine what that ultimate budget will be when we will hopefully have that all resolved, we better, by May 20th. And there will not be a shutdown. I promise you that. We will figure it out. So that's kind of where we're at. Nothing's been decided. We want to hear your concerns, your priorities. What we found to be perhaps the most effective is if we go around and state, if you want to say who you are, where you're from, and maybe share an opinion on something or a question, and then after we've heard from everyone, we'll react to different points and have a chance for some discussion. And if there's a point that we need additional follow-up or you'd like to do it personally, that's fine too. Just let us know on that. Senator Kent and I have to leave by about 11:30 for a function that the Senate, our caucus is involved in right now, but some of the other reps might be able to be here if necessary. So with that background, maybe we could start with Mr. Fent.
Well, good morning. Thank you for being here. My name's Dennis Fent. I'm a resident of Oakdale and have been for decades and decades. My wife and I are both retired teachers, so when why am I here? Probably first and foremost, education. To me, it's the most important thing in the world. I was down to see some of you on Tuesday because I know there was talk of gun legislation, and nothing is more important than keeping our schools safe. And I don't have the answers how to do it all, but I look for you people to find those answers because it's terribly, terribly important. So that's me. Thank you.
Sharf Rainey, I'm from Woodbury. Lived there 25 years or so. Yeah, when it was just old Woodbury. Now it's all the way over almost to Afton, so it's a much bigger district at this point. I'm in A, so 2 is my rep and Susan is my senator. And I've been involved, but you never can learn too much.
Any particular issue? Question?
Not yet.
No pressure.
Thanks for being here.
Hi, my name is Jodelle Miller. I live in Senate District 53 on the B side. I'm here to find out what the legislative priorities are. I care a lot about water and education.
Hello, I'm Riley Gilman. I'm here from Skyview Middle School. Last year, my group did a project on counselors per student ratio, and Minnesota has the second worst ratio from counselors to students out of all the states, and I was wondering how high that priority is.
Great questions.
I'm Lillian Bodat. I'm also from Skyview Middle School. I'm also a part of Project Citizen, and last year my group focused on waste in the school district, and I was wondering how high that is on your list also, and cutting and managing waste for our state.
I am Catherine Morgan. I'm a teacher of these very impressive youngsters at Skyview Middle School. I actually live in Stillwater, but have taught in 622 for 16, 17 years now. And when we heard that this was happening, leading into our Project Citizen project, I just thought
the District 622 School Board, Maplewood and Oakdale. Been on the board since 2000, so I'm kind of a veteran grandmother on the board. But I was retired for a bit, and now I work for Senator Uyghur as his legislative assistant. So, and I have to say, our new education commissioner is a former middle school teacher, and she taught for 10 years in St. Paul schools. So she came in to talk to members about her education priorities, and talked a lot about the middle school experience as being something that needs attention, you know. And so I'm excited about that thought that you know, elementary students get a lot of support, and then all of a sudden you're in middle school and maybe they're not getting the support. I don't know. It'll be a good conversation. So thanks for keeping it.
I'm Roy Gilman, Project Riley. Been in the same Maplewood residence for the last 30 years. We're pretty involved in the community. We have 3 older siblings of Riley's, all went through the school district, schools, several different locations, obviously. So we're pretty concerned about safety issues, just education in general. We have been extremely happy with the district, though. I think they have a very good education. They're all going through college right now. They got those tuitions to worry about. Sure. Been in law enforcement for over 30 years, so safety is one of the Thank you.
Okay, great. My name is Vivian Latimer Tannehill, and I am a resident of Woodbury, and I am Senate District 53B. And I have concerns about taxes and tax conformity. I'm dreading going through and having to redo my taxes twice this year without knowing where the legislature is on that and where it is on the priority list. I'd also like to know a little bit more about the plans for taxing Social Security or not. And that's it. Thank you.
I'm Candy Marcus from Maplewood, and my biggest concern is always healthcare, as well as education. The other thing that I'm curious about is in the past several years, there's been big omnibus bills at the end of the year, and it's such a big conglomeration, people don't necessarily know everything that's in it. And I'm hoping that there's ways of shrinking those down so that bills really do represent one thing and people know what's happening. That would be a whole lot easier for citizens, and I've got to believe for legislators as well.
Hi, my name's Linda Stanton. I live in Woodbury. I'm concerned about the proposed legalization of marijuana. Can you hear me? Yep. And just what the studies have shown is that in Colorado, the money that's brought in by it is not enough to cover the cost of the services needed, such as calls to poison control. They've also found that there's an increased high school dropout rate, so it's had a very bad impact on youth, even though it's a legalization for adults. So I'm very concerned that there's a lot of big money pushing this next $1 trillion industry. I just think it would be the wrong thing to do. And my other concern is the Medicare buy-in, with a Minnesota Care buy-in rather, is that I just don't think it's sustainable spending, because that would be a spending program. You don't know how much people are going to use that, and what the state pays the providers, which is the other half of our healthcare system. That's who's providing the services for people. So they're not reimbursing at a rate that's affordable. So there really has to be another solution. It's really not any more sustainable than reinsurance to have that buy-in.
Dallas.
Dallas Pearson. Obviously I'm videoing it, and if you want to be able to watch the video, it'll be on youtube.com/North Oasis. I posed most of my questions in the last one, but the one that I'll add, and that is on water. We're all urban core, so the issues for water here are a little different than the rural, and rural suffers a lot because of a lot of the regulations that are put in because of the urban core needs and end up getting applied to them as well. So there needs to be differences there because the needs for agriculture, one of our biggest economic drivers in Minnesota. So what are we doing to try and accommodate the needs for farmers?
Well, I think we have about 6 topics, and if there's time, we'll have a chance to add some additional commentary. I think what we'll do is, first, education may have been mentioned the most, and in some various aspects on education, counselors, and just the fundamental expectation of safety in every school building. So I'll mention as the minority lead for education that it is personally my highest priority, that students are our future job force, our democracy depends on it, our economic security, and you have a constitutional right to an education. And that said, we need to invest and to make sure that we continue to provide for the world's best workforce. That's what we put in state law as to what our expectation is, that students are ready for college, career, post-secondary path. Could be to the military, and we have a number of programs as you go into that. For what we'll be looking at, over $18 billion of our approximately $50 billion budget goes towards schools. It all goes into a formula and various programs. Additionally, there's federal money. And so I'll look at additional funding that goes into the formula, and if we can get more information to you as to what it might mean. The amount will be determined based on how much we're going to have in each of our target areas, but I'll go for additional money in the formula. A second area is for special education. Every student has a right through federal law since 1975, I believe it was, when President Ford signed the Individuals Disability Education Act. It's very important that every student get that opportunity, regardless of what their developmental challenge might be, and it costs more in most cases to meet that challenge. The federal government has not met that expectation of the 40% partnership, and so it's meant school district budgets have been stressed by having to take some of the money from the general fund to help subsidize the special ed. Every school district, including right here in 622, Woodbury, and have said, please provide additional funds for special ed so we can meet that challenge. And so I will be working on that as well. It's a matter of additional money. As well, there are going to be some reforms, hopefully agreed to, addressing just paperwork and regulation. Yes, there should be a strong accountability plan developed with the parent and the teacher, and that's a right. But in terms of the amount of paperwork that's required right now, most everyone agrees we need to have less and streamline that. So there will be a number of proposals, hopefully reach a bipartisan agreement on the special ed. Just on school safety is so important. You have to have a fundamental expectation that you're safe when you go to school. And we had a bill that had various pieces of legislation addressing that. To me, it's so important to have more counselors, and Susan Kent is going to champion for hearing that. She'll talk more about that, but more school counselors that can identify maybe a student needs help, or they're a loner, or they just need some additional help. They're not getting that attention that they need. So for school safety, more mental health personnel that can help just for students in coping. The challenges are just getting greater. And the Republican majority had just announced mental health, and the Senate had announced addressing mental health needs is very important. And so for me, in the schools and addressing the school violence issue, it's getting at that issue. We just had that chilling reminder of what can happen in a school at North High. When we saw the lockdown that occurred, I don't know about the individuals or what all happened, but I do know there'll be more lockdowns in the future, and we can never have a ceasefire on our attempt to get this resolved as efficiently as we can. So I'll be supporting additional legislation, not only for mental health, but for facilities improvements that are needed, and there'll be a lot of bipartisan work, but then it's going to be how much additional can we do. There's additional things that we can be doing too in terms of, but I'll have my colleagues perhaps address that on education. I do want to just put in one plug too for early education and the importance of having students ready for K. And if you can be in a high quality program, they're voluntary, but if you can be in a high quality program, your chances of being able to read in 3rd grade, your chances of graduating and being ready for the next step are so much better if you have that high quality opportunity early on. So there'll be opportunities for us to expand on that. For education, those are a few points I'd like to make, and maybe go to a House member next and then back and forth.
Can I just throw some out and then you guys can jump on? Yeah. And then I know Susan will have.
Yeah. But we'll stay in the education area.
Yeah, so on education I don't serve on the committee, but Peter and I, when we were in the House members, we voted to pass some education stuff. It was in that great big bill. Who mentioned the great big bill? That got vetoed, but it was, I had a copy when I was, for my debate here, it was literally this thick, and of all sorts of things, and honestly, a lot of stuff that was good in there, and one of them was school safety, and we all voted to for that part of it, certainly for school safety, and it's, it's such a real problem, with, you just mentioned what happened in North High, and the new Governor Walz was talking about when he was a kid growing up in Nebraska, they used to go to, we were at a thing yesterday for water and out DNR, and he was saying, yeah, we used to go to football practice and all, everybody would come to football practice, throw their guns in their locker, and hunt rifles or whatever, and then go to practice and then go out and hunt or whatever it was. But it's such a different world, and we're trying to figure that all out, and the House is well positioned to do that. I'm pretty excited about, it's not K-12, but I'm going to be on higher, and I asked to be on it, and I just really think it's really important work at that end of the spectrum too, and it's not just colleges and in the traditional sense, we all, I think we're kind of like, I remember my grandpa at my uncle's house saying, Leon, you're going to college, and that's not necessarily the conversation we all need to have today. I mean, trades are honorable works, and certainly law enforcement is amazing. Of course, that's college educated, but it's there's other work that is needed and wonderful. But 3Ms of the world, we need to make sure that we're meeting today's workforce going forward. And we've made some investment in capital investment. All of us have voted on some investments over at Century College at the Fab Lab and other things. And that was the other 6th committee I forgot to mention. I'm on the Senator Leader in the House, but anyways, I don't need to talk so long. But it's we're all really fired up, and our caucus is definitely, the leaders met together. I'm sorry, I'll just keep talking for a second. But Gazelka and Hortman were the same classmate as me, and they're friends, but I think there's a lot of stuff that they really agree on, and they're going to take that stuff up right away, and I'm pretty excited about the status. Yeah, it's going to get a little messy at the end, maybe, as it always does, and after the financial report comes out, and what you're going to do with money, but there's stuff that we agree on, like opioids, protection of the seniors, and certainly the school safety. So I'll shut up.
When people ever ask me, why did you run for office, it was largely because of education. I think it is fundamentally the most important thing we can do as a state, not only for our kids and their future, and I'm a proud mother of a senior now, it's hard to believe, at Woodbury High School, but for our workforce and for our state's economic vitality. Plenty of people have pointed out, people don't move to Minnesota for the weather, but we do have an incredibly highly skilled workforce that has made us competitively successful in this country for decades. And we can't lose that. I mean, that is so intrinsic to our success as a state. We still have a lot of work to do. It's not perfect, but we need to make sure we protect that. Real quickly, to step back a little bit on this budget conversation for everything, but particularly in the context of education. Everybody talks about, we got this surplus. Well, part of that surplus is because we didn't get that bill passed last year that had spending in it. So there's a little bit that's sort of left over, and you can't just run with that. I don't like to use sort of like household finance analogies for government finance because it falls apart pretty quickly, but in this way, I think it makes sense. If you think about a job and you get your base salary, but maybe you get some commission or you get some bonuses or something like that. You plan your basic household expenses on your base salary, and you use those added extra bonuses kind of stuff for socking it away for savings or a home improvement project or take a nice trip that year or something. You don't go out and buy a new car based on a bonus this year that you might not get next year, right? So that's where we are with our budget right now. People are still sort of crunching the numbers, and we will get updated numbers in February, but when people say we have $1.5 billion surplus, about $1 billion of that is one-time money. That's like the bonus money. You can't go out and hire people this year for that money and then not have resources available next year for them to be there. So the amount that we have for ongoing for increases in our school formula or special education or health and human services or anything is pretty contained. And when you look in the future years, it actually goes down. So it's a concern. So for people to act like, oh, we've got all this money lying around, that's not a realistic characterization of the situation we're in. We do have a surplus. It's a good thing, but we need to be thinking forward about it. Which brings me to the point about the question that Riley has about counselors. And thank you for bringing that up. When I first got elected, one of the things that really struck me was this problem with Minnesota and the fact that we rank, as you say, toward the bottom. I've seen it fourth and second from the last, whatever, different, it moves around a little bit. But it's unacceptable. And it's not just the high school counselors, everybody talks about education counselors, but it's a whole group called the Student Support Services. So it's counselors, it's school psychologists, it's social workers, it's nurses, and it's chemical dependency counselors. And I was really proud, finally, after a few years, a couple years ago, to pass, it's a matching grant program, and it's a multiple year matching grant program that allowed some of our districts to hire some more of those people. So the state would put in half the money, and then the district would put in the other half of the money for new positions in this world, because we know it's so important that we do that. I would love to do some more of that. And the way it is structured, because it is a finite number of years that we do that matching grant, it's enough years to be an incentive for school districts to participate, as opposed to just, here, we're going to give you money once and for 1 year hiring and you're done. This is a multiple year program. But it's a good use of 1 year money, so I'm hoping that's something we can work on. And the other thing I would say relative to the topic of school safety, just when people talk about, oh yeah, we're doing stuff for school safety, we're doing stuff for our students' mental health, there's a thing in law called the Safe Schools Levy. And it's giving funds to districts, and then they get the flexibility to spend it a bunch of different ways, and there's a big list in statute of the different ways they can spend it. A lot of that is facilities, as it should be, right? I mean, it's making sure you have a secure entrance, or how the doors lock, and if you need communication systems within the school so that the staff can communicate with each other in an emergency situation. Those are all very legitimate ways to use it. There's also, you could use it for counselors and psychologists and those people. You can also use it for school resource officers, when you have law enforcement liaisons in the schools, another good use. But again, that's a one-time fund. And so, and I've started pulling the numbers, I haven't crunched them completely, but in the past, a very tiny fraction of that money ever gets spent on people. Most of that money is spent on facilities, understandably. My point is, we need to make sure that whatever we do is supporting our schools and safety and our students in all aspects. And that includes the professionals who will be there to help them. And if someone's in crisis, or if there's something going on, we need to get student support in a lot of different ways, that we've made those resources available. So when you hear school safety, make sure you're understanding what it is people mean when they talk about how we're going to keep our schools safe. And because there's multiple ways we need to address that, not just facilities. So.
I'd like to welcome our additional attendees and everybody. Some of you are back from the earlier meeting we had, and that's wonderful. But if you'd like to just briefly introduce yourself, and if there's a particular issue, we're just finishing some comments on education. We have 4 other topics we're going to react to and have some additional discussion. But briefly, if you'd like to.
Hi, I am Em Hurward. Pronouns of them. I am a Century alumni and a current Human Services major at Metropolitan State University. I'm an intern at Century College's Resource and Support Center, and I'm here to learn more about housing.
I am Michelle Jersak. I'm a counselor at Century College and faculty member, and I oversee the Resource and Support Center. I am also here about affordable housing. It's become quite an issue. And in Ramsey County, I'm working with the Coalition and the Wilder Foundation to pass Home for All's legislation. And one of the quotes in there, and I'll give Leon a copy, I know I gave everybody else a copy, is that in the last 10 years, homelessness in our K-12 suburban, so this is including St. Paul, Ramsey counties, went from less than 200 to 800, so it's quadrupled in the last 10 years. And as a counselor, it's really hard to students have a hard time learning if they don't know where they're going to be sleeping and if they don't feel safe. So that's my #1 issue this year. I have a guest with me, my daughter, she's 10. When I was younger, my dad brought me every place to learn about the political system and things like that. And so I'm doing the same, and hopefully one day she'll thank me for it.
You're in 5th grade at Matuska?
Yeah, okay. She's a little shy. Yeah, and she's a Girl Scout too, so we are. I love Girl Scouts because it does get girls involved in leadership. Yeah.
Welcome.
Jeff Moore, family invited me to stop by and Michelle. Just trying to get involved. So less than an introduction
Great. We're going to hear from Representative Fisher, Representative Zhang, maybe about a minute or so on education. And then we don't necessarily all have to talk then for some of the other subjects, but just to cue it up, we're looking at water, tax conformity, marijuana, healthcare, and housing. So, okay.
Very quickly on education, one of the things I want people to keep in mind on is society is very different today than it was a number of years ago. And as a result, we have to look at our education system differently. The example I'll use is my father, who was born in the late 20s, when he went to school, he never finished kindergarten. Because back at that time, kindergarten was not considered important. I don't think anybody today would ever argue that. And I think that's one of the things that we have to think about as we're thinking about early childhood. The needs of society are demanding more things to be done and expecting our kids to know more. So we have to start thinking about the education system differently. Likewise, as we start thinking about the other end, originally, they figured just a high school education was all you needed to be successful. And many people never completed high school and weren't able to be successful. Today, that's a rarity to be able to do that. And as a result, we need to be making sure that we're keeping affordable the higher education options, not just in the 4-year degree or 2-year degree, but the trade school areas where we've got the great shortages. And that's one of the errors that we've kind of had over the last few years is we've kind of lost funneling kids, making them aware of the different options, and making sure we're making kids aware of all options, not a few options, as they continue on in their education and starting out their careers.
Yeah. And I'm also on the higher education committee, and one of the things I'm looking forward to working on is some of the career pathways legislation that can help our young folks or people that are re-entering the workforce or shifting industries to get some training to have the skills that can help prepare them to enter the workforce and get a good paying job. We were at the One Minnesota conference earlier this week, and they projected that in 2030 there's going to be a shortage of workforce, and so I think preparing our community for the upcoming decades that are ahead of us, and so giving people the skills to enter the workforce and to find the jobs that can help them make a good living and keep our state prosperous.
2 other subjects to the single subject rule, which was brought up, and then waste reduction and what can be done. On water, Representative Fisher, you're the chair of the new water subcommittee.
Right. This is something new that's in the House. We've never done this before, is having just one committee to address water issues. And a lot of what we're going to be doing is kind of building off of the Legislative Water Commission that both Senator Weir and I are on. We're going to be dealing with policies coming through there. And there's a couple of things that we're looking at. Is number one is that over the last few years since we've had the Legislative Water Commission, we found out very strongly this is not a Republican versus Democratic issue. There's a lot of agreement across the aisle that we want to make sure that we're protecting our water for the future. We're all very cognizant, whether it's my colleagues who are in rural Minnesota or somebody that's locally, is that typically whatever ends up in the water, somebody else is drinking it. And it's just a matter of time when it gets there. The example being is in southeast Minnesota, if something ends up in the water, say if a manure pit breaks open and leaks through, that could be in somebody's drinking water within 24 to 72 hours. That's because of the different geology. In this area region, depending what aquifer you're in, it may be 20 to 50 years before you see it, or it could be thousands of years before it makes its way in. Northern Minnesota and central sands areas is a little different, and so we have to take a look at the geology that's involved with it. And as a result, the other thing that comes in is the regulations that go with it. We want to make sure that we're protecting waters, but we're also making sure that we're giving the opportunity for our businesses out there. And one of the things I'm real proud to say of is that I've worked closely with my counterpart on the Republican side of the House to move some things forward. One of the things that has made some people on my side very uncomfortable is the legislative bill that would address the regulation. It's called John Stein's letter of what the process is going to be to make sure that businesses are...
John Stein, Pollution Control Agency.
Right, and he's from Maplewood, is making it clear so businesses know what is the process they have to go through, what to expect in terms of the regulation field. The other area that we've worked very hard on, we're going to bring that bill back because it failed in omnibus prime. And I've had, well, there are people on my side who are uncomfortable with it and are pushing not to it. It's going to be a bill that I'll be working with the other side to bring back across. But the reason it also gets very complicated on the regulations, as I mentioned earlier, water flows very differently. And as a result, when they set regulations, they have to make sure that they're protecting the water quality, not just when it's flowing normally, but when it's very low flow. And an example of a business thing that was just in the papers, as you may have heard, in southwest Minnesota, a company called True Shrimp went over to South Dakota because they said the regulatory process was too slow for them here in the state. And one of the problems that they were facing is that for the shrimp, you need salt water. And when you discharge salt water, at a high flow time, it may be okay, but what they have to take a look is the low flow time, because the waters they're discharging into are also used by agriculture. And if you've got too much salt in the water going through at a low flow time, all of a sudden which is when they're going to be pumping for irrigation at low flow times, all of a sudden the water going out is too salty, which will not only impede the crop growth, but eventually the soil becomes too salty and no longer will grow crops. And that is the balance that we have out there, is trying to figure out how do we do it. So as a result, some of these things get a little bit more complicated. In our state, we've been extremely protective of our waters here to keep them clean. One of the things you're hearing a lot about the chlorides that are ending up in our water, people saying we need to do more about that. And this is one of the consequences. You see that as a result, while the company knew what was expected of them, they felt it wasn't moving quick enough, and so they went to another state where they don't have the same high water quality standards that we do.
Peter, I believe, is the most knowledgeable person on water issues in the legislature, and his father was a hydrologist, and we're just very pleased that he's become a leader in that as a public policy. So we'll be working a lot more. The recommendations that we have on water policy are listed on the website for the Legislative Water Commission. I think my newsletter, I know some of you get it, we just restated the recommendations we have for water.
Can I just say two quick sentences? Especially as you look down through our district into Woodbury and Oakdale, we're dealing with the 3M water settlement, and we had legislation last year. It's very important that that settlement stays in the East Metro. We don't want any of our non-East Metro colleagues eyeballing that money as if they can use it for something else. It is for our water. And so, and we created a system process for oversight. So we're doing things to make sure that that is going to be administered, and we're continuing to work with our locals and local community members and pay attention to the process to make sure that that process is working.
Concern was expressed understandably about the single subject rule and the nearly 1,000-page bill that was vetoed. And hopefully that will never, ever happen again. And, Representative Young, just fresh off the campaign and, new to the legislature, maybe you'd like to offer your thoughts on that, and maybe we're all tracking on that.
Yeah, and so, we were doing new member orientation, speaking with Speaker Hortman, the leader of our state legislature. She talked to us about, what rules we can put in place to make sure that we don't stay past midnight, that we get the work done in a timely manner, but yet allowing residents and the people of Minnesota to come and hear and to have transparency on our bills. And Representative Lilly is a veteran, and he could probably speak more to the legislative process itself and some of the committee structure that we're putting in place.
And you have a House reform.
And he's a chair, so I think he can speak a little bit better to.
Well, it's funny, when I very first got in the legislature, my very first vote, I think, was related, years ago, it was a single subject issue that the conceal and carry had passed, became law, but it was in a big bill, and someone sued on this, and so we had to vote again because it was determined by the courts that it was illegal. And that
wasn't a bill on circus?
Yeah, so it was like, and that was actually really pretty small. And quite honestly, we both have done this. Both parties have done this. And we're not, as Dems, we're not innocent. The Republicans did it this time, but we had a bill that during my tenure, it's called the 1812 bill. And Lyndon Carlson was the author of that bill. And that was, it was, a big bill with all sorts of stuff thrown in there. And part of the problem is, honestly, for us, because someone brought up the school safety, and we talked about that, but that was, you get these big bills, and it's really hard to, to vote against some of them, because there's so many good things, and then there's so much, I don't want to use the word, but not so good stuff. So anyways, that's the problem. And I'm of the belief that, and I'm pretty excited to be on the Rules Committee, but we were guilty, so I appreciate that. I think our leaders have stepped up, and I believe the Gazelka, that's one of the things they've talked about, the leader of the Senate with Leader Hortman, and I think there is going to be a major effort to try to eliminate that. And a lot of it's not necessarily evil. Sometimes it's the push of the time of the clock, so we all do that. You might cut corners when you're doing a home project, to bring up your home stuff, but you might cut corners, or drive fast to get somewhere. Sorry, police officer. So that's kind of what it is in that nature. It's not necessarily, I think this big bill had some bad stuff in it. It was political to try to get us to vote, to make us look bad. So there was some political reasons, but there is a commitment. I'm sorry to talk long on this. Super fascinating issue though, because we all, there's a variety of reasons, strategic why that might happen, but I think there is a commitment to try to eliminate that process.
And half a sentence on this one, because Candy made the right point. It's not about us, really. I mean, it's about the ability, and Representative Jean's point about making sure the debates aren't into the middle of the night and that kind of stuff. Transparency, making sure that the public has an opportunity to know what is going on in the legislature, that we can represent you. Anytime you've got 3 people in a room making the final decision, none of us are in that room, right? So that means none of you are represented in that room. And that's why it's so important that we get back to the processes and the rules.
On tax conformity, it's our expectation that all Minnesotans will be able to decide whether or not they want to do a standard deduction, which is doubled at the federal level now through the federal law change. And if you want to do the standard deduction, or if you want to itemize, it's up to you. The Minnesota Revenue Department has issued a ruling to that effect, and that's when hopefully you'll be able to do your federal taxes at the end of the month. And I'm not quite sure the federal shutdown, how that's going to fully play out. No one knows for sure. But on conformity, the ability for you to decide either way. You're not going to be tied in necessarily to doing a standard deduction. If you want to itemize, you can go ahead. In terms of the overall tax policy, that's what's going to be rolling out over the next 110 days, whether it's further addressing Social Security. Part of it is not taxed, but if you wanted to expand that further, it'll all be a part of the discussion, and that goes for all the tax policy that we're going to have.
Can I bring
yes.
up another little thing on that issue? At this time of year, all of the various caucus leaders go on different panels and talk about these issues. So several of us saw last night on Almanac, and Tom Bach has done this in a couple of different forums, and he makes a really, really, really good point. The federal tax bill did not help Minnesotans on average. And so part of our challenge as we do tax conformity is to make sure that we don't do it in a way that exacerbates those exact same penalties to Minnesotans. And so, we're going to, and I really appreciate him saying that, because it's about Minnesota working people and, middle income people, making sure that we're held harmless, as they say, that we don't pay a penalty because of that. So I appreciate that emphasis.
One item I believe that the leaders of the legislature, I think, kind of put forward, the process in terms of what's going to be heard in the order. And I believe marijuana was discussed last night, and that was brought up.
So, I've got to sit on one of these leader panels one time when this came up too, and I think it's been pretty interesting, because I think there's a pretty consistent view that two things. Minnesotans want us to at least address it. This is something that Minnesotans are talking about. There are a lot of people who believe we need to go ahead and do this legalization, and as elected representatives, we're listening to them and we're hearing that. On the other hand, a lot of states are embarking on this venture and learning a lot. And Linda, you brought up some great points. I want to look at, that's the thing, we need to look at this research. It's a complicated issue. There is taxing, there is public safety, there is, there's all sorts of quality control issues around it, and like different states allow individuals to grow a certain amount themselves or not, and how much, and California's having all sorts of, there was an article in the New York Times the other day that was really fascinating, because I happened to tour the Leaf Line facility, which is the medical cannabis down in Cottage Grove just a couple weeks ago. Oh my gosh, you really have to go take a shower after you are in there, because the smell of that plant is so overwhelming. And so people in California, where there are now marijuana legal farms, neighbors are all up in arms, because it's like their neighborhood stinks, So I mean, who'd have thought, But these are the kinds of things that, as we're looking at this, we need to be learning from what's going on. Bottom line, it is a complex issue. There are no easy answers here how we do it, and we have to be aware of what it does to our medical process, etc. So anything that complicated isn't happening like that. But I do think we owe it to Minnesotans to respond to their interest, that we have the conversation and we really dive into these issues and understand them.
And what I expect we'll get at least done this session is probably a task force or a full report on medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, some reports from other states, like in Colorado.
Probably more study.
Yeah, more comprehensive study.
On waste reduction in the schools, it's very important, and what I would suggest is, a school board member here at Nancy Livingston would, at your own school at Skyview, ask them what's being done at that school, and in terms of reduction, recovery, recycling, and then with the school district, they can have policies. I know there's economic incentives that can be done. We fully encourage that in our own state capitol building, but that would be the short answer. See what program you can do right there, starting in your classrooms, your school, and then present it to the school board. And to the extent there's a policy, we do have goals and statute regarding that now, but would be happy to talk about it.
And what items does the school or the school district purchases, like can it be recyclable?
Yep.
We certainly do that for the city, so that what we buy
state's really moved on that. It's fascinating. It's hard to, I don't know if you guys, you got all those, like the waste barrels. It's almost hard sometimes to figure out, you're like, I don't know, maybe not for your young folks, but for me, I'm like, okay, what's that recyclable? Anyways, the state's really doing a good job, and there's a bit of shaming too if you ask for like paper, which causes some battle, with the northern folks because they're farming trees, so we have, it's an interesting state, so they want us to print stuff out, and then sometimes our caucus, if you ask for a copy, people look at you like, like you're wasting. So it's fascinating.
Just quickly define it. Most of your households, the majority of stuff is recycled now. There's more in recycling. I mean, it's changing, but we have to keep working on that.
I read a great article yesterday. You were talking about some articles you read on marijuana, but 3M is every product. Their employees are being challenged to meet sustainability goals. So every single, even chemists, my son's a PhD, he's a chemist at 3M, and even they, every department is, every product is supposed to meet sustainability goals. And I think as a state we can learn from industry there. I mean, it's quite a challenge when you think of how big your husband works there, but just how big that company. I was trying to read it as a 200-page report, but I couldn't quite get through. But I was reading it last night and I fell asleep. But anyways, it was good, but not. It was time to go to bed.
At your school.
Sorry.
Think globally, act locally. Peter, maybe you could take us into housing and healthcare.
Okay, housing I'll be very quick on because I'm seeing we're almost at 11:30 here. Is we do have a housing crisis that's occurring. By and large, a lot of the folks who are homeless have got kids and they are working jobs. The jobs just don't pay enough. The other thing complicating it is that we've had a lot of loss of affordable and low-income housing. Is a lot of those units are being turned or converted into high rent situations. But as that is occurring, nothing is being done to replace the units, so they are disappearing quicker than they're being put in. So we have to take a look at a combination of one-time funding to help address building and also policies. And then very quickly on the healthcare situation, some people were mentioning about the Minnesota Care Buy-in. What that is being looked at is very similar to a option that people would have the ability to go into. They would still pay their fair share of the housing cost or of the insurance cost, but from what we've looked at in the past, it ends up being about 20 to 30% less, a lot because of the administrative costs that go into it. The Medicare system that we have, or the Minnesota buy-in system that we have here, operates with a lot less overhead than they do in industry. In the private industry, they operate with about 20% overhead. At the local government unit, it's about 3%. So that's one of the reasons that we're looking at, and that's one of the things that our small businesses in here, that's the number one thing that they're always asking me about, is what they can do to have a Medicare type system, or at least being able to have the option to consider buying into the Minnesota Care system, and then paying their share of the costs that are supposed to go with it.
And in some regions of the state, you really only have one option, and so this would at least provide some competition.
Great. And prescription drugs. Anyone with concerns or family that
A lot of nodding.
where it's outrageous, and it's outrageous, and I believe President Trump just offered some additional concerns on the subject, and I don't know if it's, I always hear, well, it's the bully pulpit that we have to use, even in the state. No one seems to disagree with the need to lower the price, which, and I've seen families that have to make choices between groceries and whether they take the full amount of pills they should be taking. I just find it so totally unacceptable, and I feel very frustrated that it still hasn't. I remember when former Senator Wellstone used to take people to Canada in the bus to get, they used to work with them.
The new Attorney Generals.
But and the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, has talked about it, other Attorney Generals, but that is clearly on our radar, and we passed some legislation in a bipartisan way. Dr. Scott Jensen, I want to do a shout out for him, who a Republican senator from, is it Orono or Chanhassen, And he has just made this a crusade, and so you'll see a great deal of work on that. But it's government just saying we've got to put some additional caps on this. So add that to the healthcare debate as well. So those are many of the items that we're addressing. Michelle.
Well, you just sparked an idea in my mind, is that there's the pharmaceutical piece, but as a counselor, I've been working a lot with mindfulness, and I'm getting my certification in yoga so I can help my students. And research is showing that mindfulness techniques very often for many issues are actually more effective than drugs. And so a couple of seeds to plant is that could there be legislation that supports K through 12? I know she's had yoga since kindergarten, since preschool. So some of the mindfulness that helps prevent some of the issues. And the other piece I didn't get to say last time is for higher ed. With affordable housing, a lot of the community and technical colleges, we do not have housing on campus. When we talk to our sister institutions who have housing, that's a part of their solution. So maybe, and I know it's a huge ask, but start thinking about how can some of our local colleges build housing, because if we had family housing and couples housing as well as single housing, then we can work within our system, I think, a little bit more productively to make sure that at least when they're a student, that they have a pillow that they can sleep on.
Great, and we'll get to that. Senator Kent is one of our experts on transportation transit, which has been a lead on that. Just
very briefly. Everybody knows it's a priority. It's our roads and bridges, it's transit, it's all of it. We, as Representative Zhang said, we saw this fact that the number about the workforce shortage is over 200,000. We will be short more than 200,000 people to fill the jobs that we need to do around the state. So we need to attract people here, we need to keep people here. And when you look at the younger generation, they want transit, right? And it was funny, Governor Walz the other night told a story about having gone to like a distillery business up in northwestern Minnesota who really wants transit in the metro because his sales are here and transit helps his sales. Right, so it's understanding how interconnected we are. Right, exactly. That is the ultimate one Minnesota sort of thing. And we all work together, as he says. When Rondo does well, the range does well. What could be better? And so we need to make these investments. We need to have the conversations about how and where the money comes from. And I am excited that we have people who are really committed to making these investments that are going to have tremendous returns for us in the future.
Thanks. One more question, comment.
I'm just curious if there's plans to do work with hiring managers who have a disconnect, because we're really looking at a skills shortage, not necessarily a people shortage. And every hiring manager that I've ever worked with wanted the person with the highest credentials they could possibly get, but they were hiring for jobs that really didn't need those. So as you're talking about these different avenues, 2-year degrees and things, what are you doing to work with the business community to help them understand that they're shooting for the stars when they really should be looking at the horizon?
That is such a great point.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And the business community is involved with workforce councils, and there's workforce councils throughout the state. And so I would just say, take a look at that. But the business is at the table. We were just over at Century College with the president and a number of people. They have a very active group of the business community working with them.
And I understand that the business community is there, but is it the right people at the table? Because it's not the person who is at the top of HR that's attending these meetings. It's the hiring manager that's hiring for the position.
That is such a great point, Vivian, and please let's follow up about this one, because I would love to dig into that.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I think you have our contact information if anyone needs to get a hold of us. We all have newsletters, etc. If you want to get on that as well. And again, on behalf of all of us, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind and you're willing to be in a photo,